during the last conversation, you presented a very interesting concept that you called COVID-19 phases matrix, where you broke down the process in 3 stages. At the time of the recording in April, we're in stage 1, with the pandemic still growing and curves starting to flatten. Since then, we managed to reduce the number of cases, opening parts of the economy, increasing the availability of testing kits, returning back to the offices, and opening schools, as well as the growth of the treatment as medics are learning how to treat COVID-19 patients. However, with the recent news, we see the emergence of cases once again, which might lead to an additional round of lockdowns. So it seems that we are kind of in the middle. We're about to go into phase 2, and now we seems to be going back into phase 1 again. So with the regards to your matrix, where do you see us now, and how should we look and define the current situation when we are trying to analyze where we are heading?
Well, it's a good question, Vadim, and it's a good way to start. The reason I created that matrix the first time was really to try to create some sort of stylized model, understand a little bit what the path might look like. It was not to try to represent exactly what would happen or to predict as such, but to really give a roadmap. And I would say a few things. I think I revisited it recently, and in fact, I do think it's actually following, somewhat to my surprise, a lot of the things that I put in there. I do think we're in phase 2. I do think we've progressed in certain regards. So I would say a few big picture comments. Okay, I think the first thing we've learned since we last spoke is, and it's been said that, in the beginning we learned how to die with the virus, and now we're learning how to live with the virus. And I think that is a really important comment because we've kind of gotten to the place where we understand this is a part of our lives for the time being. We have to manage it. We can't stay locked in our homes all the time. We can't shut down every business, but we have to be smart about the way we do things. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, again, this is a model. So phase 1, which I do think we've largely come out of, was to me primarily about what I would call capacity building. I think when this first hit, I think we had serious capacity shortages in healthcare, both in terms of facilities, hospital beds, PPE equipment, treatments, all kinds of things, right? So there was a lack of capacity. There was a lack of capacity in the businesses to readjust to a new reality, to figure out how to deal with suppressed demand, to try to figure out how to keep, for governments, how to keep people gainfully employed or at least gainfully paid for the time being. And so there were all these things. There was a lack of capacity in financial markets initially, and central banks stepped in. So I think the capacity issue was critical in the first phase. And I do think in a lot of regards, we've actually moved beyond that. There are still many, many cases, so the disease is still very much with us, but hospitals have more capacity, there's more equipment, there's more ventilators, there's a lot of things that we didn't have in the beginning. The markets have been stabilized somewhat by the central banks, and I gather we'll probably talk more about that. Stimulus plans have helped stabilize the populations to a certain extent in the labor markets. So that kind of happened in the beginning. Phase 2 was, to me, I would call it more the capability phase, right? Once you secure capacity, then it's building capabilities, right? And so if you look at phase 2, the way I had kind of sketched it out, it was about learning about how to manage the virus, learning about treatments, learning about how best to utilize medical capacity, learning for businesses how to adapt to this new environment, and some did and some didn't. But I think we're in that second phase right now. I think we're in a capability building phase, and we're learning how to, as I said earlier, live with this virus, okay? One caveat, when I originally did this, I did put an asterisk and say, this will be different for every country. And I think that's true, right? So I think this matrix, you can't assume it works for all countries, They will be in different phases of where they are. They will be at different levels of take up and so on. But I do think in general, it is a pretty good picture. Where I would qualify it is, I put a pretty optimistic phase 3 as summer 2021, where there'd be a vaccine and life would get back to a new normal, whatever that is. And I would say, based on everything we're learning now, one, I would qualify that a bit. I don't think it will be a break in one summer. It will not go from end of pandemic to completely new normal. I think there will be a process. It's now clear that vaccines hopefully will be available soon, but then the distribution of them and the production of them will take a long time. Some people may choose not to take them and so on. So I think phase 3 will be more extended in terms of what I laid out. In terms of phase 2, so back to where we are today. So I think there's a few things one could say. One is, there will be flare-ups, and that was mentioned in the matrix. So you can still be in this phase where you've got capacity, which is important because it helps prevent real crises, right? Secondly, you're building your capability, you're learning, you're adapting, you have new treatments, you have new ways of managing, and you can still have flare-ups. And we're seeing it in parts of Europe. We're certainly seeing it in the States. And so, you have to remember that at the end of the day, the virus has not changed. The virus is the same. The virus goal is to infect as many hosts as possible. And until either there's a vaccine that's widely used or there's herd immunity, which we are on some path to, but we're nowhere near, it is not surprising that there will be flare-ups. Okay. And so, we still have less than 50%, in some places, well less than 50% of populations that have been infected and have some antibodies. So, we're somewhere in that second phase. We will have flare-ups. Having said that, we are in a better position to manage that. If I talk about, I'm sitting in Geneva now, and I live near the hospital. And the last time we spoke, there were ambulance sirens all around the clock, and we could hear them. And you don't hear that as much anymore. Mm-hmm. And the death rate in Switzerland has been reduced virtually to 0. So we are learning how to, as I said earlier, live with this virus. That's where I think we are. I think we're in the second phase, and all that I put in the matrix, which we won't go through now, I think still broadly applies. And I think for people that are listening and want to, kind of utilize this information, take this matrix, apply it to whatever country you're looking at, and then make your own judgments about where you think certain industries are or where you think the country is. And hopefully it's helpful as a little bit of a roadmap.
Yes, and for everyone who is interested in the matrix that we're talking about, you can find it in the link in the description of this video. It's an incredible matrix that Gregg has put together back in April, and it did, as Gregg says, worked out really, really well. And it's a great analysis tool. I think one of the things that I wanted to mention is that from maybe going from a global lockdowns, we might hopefully go into more local ones, because we can identify the areas of the most sparks, like they do in United Kingdom right now. They close towns separately, but they don't close the whole United Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point. And so the countries that have been most successful, primarily in Asia, at dealing with this virus, if you take South Korea or if you take Taiwan, what they have done is not lock down. They have quickly identified cases, quickly identified small clusters, quickly done the right contact testing, tracing. And from that, they've been able to isolate and shut down or contain these outbreaks. And so that is the path of the future, not to lock down the entire economy. It's like having to kill an ant and having an elephant step on it every time. It's overdone. So we need to be more precise, and I'm glad you brought that up.